Hi everyone, it's Catherine. Welcome to my channel, Read Journal Love. And I know I haven't been very consistent lately, but thus is life with chronic illness. So just thank you for anyone who watches my videos. I pretty much question every day if I should continue this, but it is nice to have somebody or just a way to talk about books. It's not like I get a whole bunch of comments. Anyways, the first book that I read was a buddy read that I did with Dia from Novel Idea, and that is The Shepherd of the Hills by Harold Bell Wright. And I'm familiar with this book because as a kid, I remember going to Branson, and I know we went to this play. I remember nothing of it, not a thing, except I do remember there being a gunshot and that kind of scaring me, but that's the only remembrance I have. So I'm going into this like it's, it's not a reread or a revisit of the story. It's just completely new. And but I'm really glad that I got to read it before nostalgia and from my part of, the country. Yeah, so I ended up rating the book as like 4.5, so I moved it down to 4 on Goodreads, but I really enjoyed the book. It is wholesome, and I really had a good time reading it with Dia. We both had a lot of really good thoughts, a lot more Dia. She's a lot more thoughtful in her reading. Like, she just has a lot of wisdom. So one thing I wanted to say is that I read a comment before I started reading, and I probably shouldn't have done that because that kind of like had me picking out things. And although maybe it might be true from reading, after having read the book, it did kind of keep me from enjoying it as like a whole story arc. It's just like with any classics, right? You got to kind of watch what eyes you're reading it with, and just take the book for what it is. And so I shouldn't have read that comment. I know that going forward now, don't go snooping around in the comments. But it was just had me kind of distracted a little is all it was. But as a modern reader, you can look at it like, he must not have he focused a lot on like your outward appearance, like your strength and your beauty, and that's what to him made a man and what made a woman. Okay. And so, yeah, I don't know if this writer would have really held up anything about women. And so, but again, I'm looking on that with modern eyes, and it was written in 1907. It had a lot of twists and turns, which I liked. And what we did is we would read 5 chapters a day. They're pretty short, so it wasn't too much of a time commitment a day. But it seems like every 5th chapter we landed on ended with some type of cliffhanger. And I would be like, oh, now I gotta wait till the next day. And so that happened so many times. And, but it's got action. It had fights, between the guys, which again goes to the strength and muscles and man. And then it had romance, it had history, lots of like nature because of all the descriptions of the mountains and just the caves. And I was excited about that because the caves, I have been to the caves in Branson. I do remember those as a kid. And so, they were roaming around in all the caves, and I was like, oh, I've done that in that same area. And it had this beautiful description of nature. And then there was a little supernatural parts in it. And it deals a lot with like your pasts and grief and moving forward from that. Kind of, learning, going through that process. And so I enjoyed that part with the main character. And so the starts with Mr. Howitt coming in, like just roaming through the Ozarks, right? And he stumbles upon this young man, and then he gets involved with his family, and they needed a shepherd to stay in the shepherd cottage, and watch over the flock. And so he's like, I'll take it. So that's where it began, and he never left the Ozarks again. And they all started to call him Dad because he really was more of a shepherd for everybody, not just the sheep, but the sheep, the people sheep of that holler. And so I really enjoyed that part of it. And then when it all starts unfolding to the end, it's really good. But I would really recommend reading it. And again, it's The Shepherd of the Hills by Harold Bell Wright, and I gave it 4.5. I just thought that focus was just a little much. I think even if you read it in 1907, I would just be like, okay, he was strong. We get it. And then the second book that I read is Surprised by Jesus by Dane Ortland. And I gave this 5 stars. And I would recommend everybody read this book because it was so good. It came out, I think, in 21. Let me make sure. 21. And Dane Ortland is an author that I have read before. He did the wonderful book called Gentle and Lowly. And I also gave that 5 stars. And this book, I wanted to read this because for my biblical studies challenge is the gospel. And this book looks at all 4 of the gospels and kind of looks at basically how there's the surprise of Jesus. I know that might sound weird. I'm probably not saying that right, but so let me look at my notes here. So he looks at it like how the negative of the surprise would have been by, the Jewish leaders and the Jews that at that time, because they were not expecting him. And so they were like not declining. They were not accepting of Jesus. But then the Gentiles, they were on the positive side of the surprise because they were like in awe and accepting of Jesus with his miracles and his teaching. And so I kind of liked that look of a comparison and how the two not populations, but people's groups liked and looked at Jesus. And so then it's grouped into 4 sections, one for each book of the gospel: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And he highlights certain things for each one. And so that was really, because they each do have their own emphasis. Sorry about that. Oklahoma allergies. So as I was saying, it's in the 4 sections. And so the part on Matthew is dealing more with like the morality of Jesus. And then the part on Mark is talking about like the atonement of Jesus. And then the part on Luke was talking basically like Jesus as man. And then the part on John was Jesus as Christ. And as you can see, I have there's a lot more highlighting than flags. The flags were like the try to memorize, think again, or memorize, part of that line. But there was one line that just, I thought pretty much, this book ministered to me. And there was one line that I just really thought kind of summarized the whole thought of the book. And that is that it says, that point is that in the kingdom of God, the one thing that qualifies you is knowing that you don't qualify. And the one thing that disqualifies you is thinking that you do. And so that is like this is what I just kept thinking, the upside down part of the gospel, and everything is just so upside down. The more you read it, you read the 4 books, like you just see it, how opposite his teaching really was, and so there comes the surprise and the beauty of the gospel. And so I would just really recommend it. It's called Surprised by God's Subversive Grace in the 4 Gospels. So that's all I've got read so far this month. I'm still working on Paradise Lost and Anne of Wendy Poplars, and I have a 4-day weekend, so I should get pretty far in at least one of those. I plan on just taking it easy, not feeling the best right now. So I just wanted to talk just a little bit about the book that was my favorite for the last month in March. So the book was called Happy Lies, and it is by Melissa Dougherty. I read it on the iPad, so I'm gonna have to put it up here. But Melissa is an apologist that I started following when I first got kind of aware of what apologetics was, and started to really have like what I call my crisis. And so I really like her. She kind of nerds out. She has great wit and sarcasm, and she just makes me laugh sometimes in her videos. And her content is great. So if you don't know who she is, check her out. Anyways, so I wanted to read her new book that she just did. And so it is, I'll put a picture up here again. And this goes into New Thought. So when Melissa started her apologetics ministry, she really kind of thought she was more New Age, but the more she learned and studied, and she's went to school and everything, college, she realized that what she was more involved in was New Thought. And this book really highlights the time frame, the history of how that came into our religious circles, and man, has it permeated. Whew, man, it is just crept in. And so this helps us sorry, something came on my phone. Again, hot mess of a video here. So, it just helps us to be aware, and reminds us that we need to be discerning of what we are hearing from the pulpit and from YouTube content and from books and music, songs, just so much, right? And but yeah, I personally have been influenced by it, and I thought the book was very good, and I would recommend it. I gave it 5 stars, and yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that here too, just in case you don't know who she is, because she's really good. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. Let me know how your March is, or your April is going. Okay, bye.